This week, we present Shona. So we're going to go over Shona Carano very quickly. She has initiative of 4, movement of 4, 5 energy, just like you normally expect, 4 health. She has a defense of a blue and a yellow. This does not impress me for such a melee-focused character. However, it's not actually as bad as it seems. We'll get to that. After that, her brawl roll is a blue, typical, and her disengage is an orange. Not too bad. Her character switch is with a shield and a bang. She can flip a state token that is on her card. So, yes, she does not have the most solid defense ever in terms of mitigating damage, but she has an interesting way to basically deal with states on her own. Her first ability, her first attack rather, is a 3-point attack called Broadsword. This is what gets most people's attention, and for good reason. It has a red, it has an orange, it has 2 automatic successes, and has the very unusual range of 2/2 line of sight required. She must be 2 spaces away from her target in order to use this attack. Now, we're going to skip down really quick first to her passive ability, Defense at a Distance. At the beginning of the action step of your activation, you may displace yourself if you are adjacent to an enemy, and if you declare and perform Broadsword against them as your first action. So when you look at Broadsword, immediately it looks like, gosh, this is going to be hard to use. But should the enemy be right next to you, and you do have a legal option to move to, you can displace yourself to that spot and get the 2/2 range you need for the attack. Furthermore, the switch on this attack is a bang. Displace the target if their hit points attribute is 4 or below. So this does sound very interesting, but at least as I understand the rules, there's a distinct difference between your hit points attributes and the number of wounds or damage you've taken. They're tracked separately. So when you take wounds, your hit points aren't going down per se. However, your wounds cannot exceed your hit points. This is a little different than I'm used to thinking about it, and honestly, most of the time it doesn't matter. But in this case, and as far as I can tell, this is important. If a character has 4 hit points as their attribute or less, you can displace them. This means you can bully characters, positionally speaking, if you want. Larger, beefier characters, not so much. This is actually a very interesting way to give her a little more weight in the hexagon, but it's not universal. You're not going to be threatening Maximus with this, for instance. Her next attack is actually called Hit the Blade. It costs 2 and kind of represents a little less lethal, which is hard to say with a sword, attack. This has a green, an orange, a yellow, and it's range 1 to 2. Now, having a green there actually means this is a little more of a defensive-orientated attack, and should kind of clue you in that, yes, damage is possible. However, there's more to it than just that. And this is actually made quite clear through the switches. If you spend a shield, you'll displace yourself. So say you are immobilized or something like that, you could use this. Likewise, if you wanted to set it for the next round, you could hit the blade, displace yourself, and move yourself right next to whoever it's going to be. That's actually pretty useful movement hijinks right there. Conversely, if you give up 2 successes, 2 damage, essentially, you can displace the target. Now, you can get successes in here, so it's not that you won't have no damage potential whatsoever, but this is a little more interesting in some cases because you don't have to give up the shield to do any displacing, and you're displacing them, unless they're Valkyrie, who's immune to displacement, or Gata when she's used Quicksilver. So you can bring them closer, or you can move them away, which is very good in a scoring situation, scoring scenario. This does not have the disadvantage that Broadsword's displacement has, in that there's no maximum health requirements there. So with this, she could move Maximus out of the way. She could get him off the scoring zone, away from an enemy he's trying to help. There's a number of ways you can use it, like any good displace. And of course, then we have defense at a distance, which we talked about with Broadsword. Very useful passive ability. Shona is someone that does want to get in kind of close, and she needs the ability to manipulate her position, not just for movements like anyone else would, but primarily get the most mileage out of Broadsword. This is a very nice ability when you look at it in conjunction with Broadsword. However, you do want to keep in mind this does limit your later options. You would not be able to do a double move. You would not necessarily be able to hit the blade twice, say you're surrounded. It does commit you to Broadsword. However, if you can get an extra energy on her, say with a Gata or a Musashi, then that does free you up a bit more. No, it's a good ability, kind of on the front of things. Shona Carano, I've liked using her. I'm not terribly good with her. But she can be downright fearsome with the right tactics backing her up, or the right situations. In a game I had not long ago, I one-shotted Hammerhead, which pretty much mortified everybody, including myself. I was like, it was good for me, but I felt really bad for my opponents. That just was really scary. So, speaking of scary, let's get into her tactics. Now, the Legendary Bahadurs have some interesting tactics as a whole, but what I like about Shona is Some of her tactics are actually additional abilities. They don't necessarily have a point cost associated with them. You play it, and the tactic card itself is what's allowing you to do it. So it's not there with a 0, it's actually a blank cost. Amputate is one of these cards. During the action step of Shona Carano's activation, perform the attack, amputate. It is 3 oranges, range 1 to 2, line of sight required. If you inflict at least 1 damage to the target, add damage tokens until they have as many as their hit points attributes. Impose the -2 energy state on yourself. And this has actually got probably some of the best art in her whole set, and it's one of the reasons I call her the CrossFit Queen. Shona is badass in the right situations, and this is definitely one of them. This is one of the cards that people overreact to. So if you're playing against a Shona, and so you're playing standard, you got Tao Wu, and you have that no card, this is noteworthy situationally. You should take an examination of the game. Can you recover from this character going to the infirmary or not? How important is that character? No's are valuable. Anyway, if you have another way of denying the ability, great. I personally would almost say you might be not. I'm not saying you should let it happen, but you do need to weigh your options and think about the cost versus value of either playing a lot of tactic cards to get their defense up or using a no, things like that. Certainly Sterling Forge, that'd be good for a little bit better response for that. Maybe TCOM with standard, no is probably the easiest single card solution. If you're playing Shona, the mere threat of this, again, gets people to overreact. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And because they don't necessarily know if you have it or not, it is always going to be in the back of their minds and might cause Shona to be a distraction to them. This is good, unless you're coming in ranged. With her low defense, the fear of amputate could get Shona gunned down. So you do want to be careful to get into position and approach effectively. This one card, just from what I've seen online, is something that people just go about. And it shouldn't be that way, but it is. I think it's a great card. I think the possibility of taking Maximus out is a very powerful one, especially as popular as a character he is. And really, any character. I wouldn't waste this on a lower health character necessarily, given her normal damage potential. But for larger targets, it's very fearsome. And that's why, again, people will overreact to this. The threat of it will get people to overreact. And you have to plan accordingly. So, I think that's about all I can really say on this subject for now. You do have options, whether defending it with tactics, using smoke, dazzling ranged characters, whatever. Just be aware this amputate stirs up very strong emotions in some players, many players. Next up is going to be Vigor. During the action step of Shona Carano's activation, until the end of the round, your attacks against stunned or dazzled targets cost 1 action point less. Ignore the effects of smoke. This is a card that she cannot make use of on her own, and you have to have team support for her. Maybe it's Final Boss, maybe it's Gata. Maybe it's Lakshmi. There's a good number of characters that can hand out the requisite states. Likewise, if there's a Cosmo on your team or their team, and Smoke's out there, that's not a bad thing either. This is a very cool card if you can pull it off. Certainly, taking Broadsword from 3 points to 2 points against a target, or making even hit the blade from 2 points down to 1, could turn Shona into a blender. And that is a beautiful, wonderful thing. Realistically speaking, if you can get a good target with this, that is fantastic. If you can get more than one target with this, count yourself lucky. If you can get more than one attack off with this, depending on how much movement you spend. So for instance, if you got to spend 4 energy to move 8 spaces to get it to a target, you're only going to get 1 hit the blade off. This really needs setup, and it's something that's personally I have tried setting it up. I have not succeeded yet, but it is a good card if you can get that done. You will want to think about your team composition with Vigor. If you don't think you can reasonably pull it off, then you're probably better off not having it. If you happen to have T-Com, maybe pull this in later. If there's not a card that you might prefer better, using What If. This would be one of those cards you would want to consider as on a side to deck of swords. That maybe I'll bring that in. Maybe. But again, if you can pull it off, you can set it up. This is a really cool card to have. And something that, if you can fish it back out again, even better. Riposte. When an enemy attacks, declares an attack on Shona Carano. Until the end of the round, you may add a blue and 2 oranges to your defense rolls against targets within range 1 to 2. So her normal defense being a blue and a yellow, not so great. Adding this makes attacking her a very dangerous thing. And certainly if you're putting her in a position where she's essentially causing a choke point, for instance, enemies have to go past her to get somewhere, or if she is controlling a scoring zone, there's any number of things where you put her there with the intentions of them attacking you, and she suddenly goes from being on defense to being really quite dangerous. With all of that, I mean, really 4 dice like that, and all of them having successes, you could potentially one-shot some characters using this. I wouldn't count on it necessarily, but it should give anyone pause in terms of attacking her if she is in a guarding position. If she's trying to hold an area, if anything like that, where basically you need to get rid of her in order to do something. And I think that's great. This is a wonderful card. Noteworthy? I think so. I would definitely say it's contextual, like a lot of things that are noteworthy, but the right use of this card, Riposte, can just do wonders in a round. So, finally, she's got one more tactics card. It's called Whirlwind. During the action step of Shona Carano's activation, perform the action Whirlwind. It's a blue, it's a yellow. Now, what's really nice about this is it has the double arrow. Inflict 1 damage to each enemy within range 1 to 2. This is also a green ability. It does not count as an attack. That is amazing. Additionally, if you want to, you can spend the dice are there actually for the switch. If you can get a shield and a bang, inflicts one wound to an enemy within range 1 to 2. So really, you have the chance of getting one more enemy, maybe two. If you're just kind of depending how the dice go. I mean, this is one you could even buff up with a few tactics cards if you want to. Especially since it's to an enemy, you can decide where that goes. That's sweet. I love uncontested damage. It's a very powerful thing. And again, this is no defensive roll. No defensive roll. That is bypasses a lot of downsides an attack like this could potentially have, where you're just roll and block, or roll and I miss. The dice hate me. No, this is great. This is another one where she's just put her in the middle of a scoring zone or in a high traffic area. And you can just really soften up a bunch of targets at once. I mean, you could potentially take out targets like Gata, who are normally kind of hard to actually hit in the first place. That's Shona. The CrossFit Queen is, I think she's really cool. I've used her with some success, but I haven't gotten, I think, the full mileage out of her yet. Personally, I would say she's a little more of an intermediate character as opposed to a beginning character. And I think I love her all the more for it. She is in the Legendary Bahadurs expansion. Pick that up. It's actually got a lot of really cool stuff in there. I think all of us actually have our preferred characters from that set, which actually does kind of say something. So that's Shona. Next week we're going to talk about, I think we're going for Oberon. See you next time.